Dragon Emperor Sun Chapter 551 to Chapter 560. Chapter 731. The distance between Tianmumen and Miao village is not far, but the mountain road is rugged, so you can only walk or ride horses, and the speed is slower. It was not until near noon that everyone rushed to the front of Tianmumen mountain. At this moment, in front of the Tianmumen mountain gate, there are hundreds of young girls gathered, and these people are not Tianmumen disciples. There are many Tianmumen believers, and some nearby residents. These girls are gathered in front of the mountain gate, very crowded. David was a little puzzled. How could so many women gather in front of Tianmu gate? The welcoming team was blocked outside the mountain gate and could not get in at all. At this time, on the observation deck above the mountain gate, a great master shouted, "The welcoming team returns, everyone makes way." The great master was so angry that he sank into Danshan. This shout was louder than shouting with a loudspeaker. Everyone turned their heads. After seeing the welcoming team, they all ducked to both sides. Many girls screamed like crazy when they saw Xia Chao dressed in red. When Xia Chao saw so many girls, a smug smile appeared on his face. Is this Xia Chao so popular with girls? David was a little puzzled. Although this Xia Chao looks really handsome, he is not a celebrity. Why are so many girls following him? Hearing the girls' shouts, Xiao Lan, who was sitting in the sedan chair, slightly lifted the sedan curtain and glanced out. When the girls saw Xiao Lan in the sedan chair, they were all envious. They wished they were the one in the sedan chair. When the welcoming team entered the mountain gate, the great master above the mountain gate spoke again. Today is our eldest young master's happy day, so the mountain gate is open to allow you to bathe in the prepared pool. The water in this pool is the mountain spring water in my mountain gate. This spring water can nourish the body, heal the disease and concentrate the mind, and the most important thing is to beautify the face, but you are only allowed to bathe in the pool, don't run around. Otherwise don't blame me Tianmumen for not being affectionate. Just after the Grand Master finished speaking, hundreds of girls shouted and rushed in, unable to stop him. The moment David stepped into Tianmumen, the surrounding aura suddenly became rich, which made the hairs on David's body explode, desperately absorbing this rich aura. How can there be such a strong spiritual energy here? Is it really a spiritual spring? David couldn't bear it any longer, and wanted to see what the spring water was like. But David knew that if he ran around at this time, it would be easy to be discovered. When the wedding was attended for a while, everyone was attracted, and he was going to check the so-called Ling Chuan secretly. Soon, David and the others arrived at a hall in Tianmumen. The hall was very large, covering 1,000 square meters on the ground. Just go to church. After Xia Chao whispered a few words with Dalitu, he left directly, and David also took the opportunity to slip out. Eldest young master, everything is ready, those girls are still happily taking a bath. Just after Xia Chao walked out of the hall, the great master who had just spoken at the mountain gate whispered in Xia Chao's ear. Yet. Xia Chao raised his mouth, after I absorb the yin qi from these girls, I will definitely be able to break through with Xiao Lan's natural beauty, and my father will not be my opponent. After Xia Chao finished speaking, he slowly walked towards a mountain behind the hall. After David slipped out of the hall, he also followed the guidance of the spiritual energy and walked towards the back of the hall. At this moment, on the mountain peak behind the main hall, a huge natural spring pool appears, and upwards is a spring with an area of only tens of square meters. Chapter 732. Hundreds of girls all undressed and soaked in the spring pool. Some wore swimsuits, and some just stripped naked. When David hid behind a big rock on the mountain and looked over, the white flowers were almost full of flowers. David's eyes were not blinded. Blah blah blah. David suddenly lowered his head and found that he had a nosebleed, and a drop of nosebleed fell to the ground. Depend on. David hurriedly stopped the bleeding. Even if David was a cultivator, seeing this scene, he couldn't control his inner restlessness. But not far from the spring pool, Xiao Chao stood with his hands behind his back, looking at the hundreds of undressed girls in front of him. His face was not even moved. David discovered this scene, and was even more convinced that Xiao Chao was definitely not a man anymore. I saw Xiao Chao sit down slowly, and then his hands seemed to be scribbling something in the air, but soon, there was a small whirlpool in the air, and the girls in the bath didn't notice anything unusual. Still there was a fight in the fountain. Soon, white mists rose from the top of each girl's head, and from a distance it looked like water vapor was slowly rising. Those white mists were quickly sucked in by the vortex in mid-air. David knew that these were not water vapors, but the yin qi on the girl's body. As the yin qi was slowly sucked away, some girls began to look pale, and trembled all over, feeling cold all over. However, in order to beautify the skin and nourish the skin, these girls all endured it, still soaking in the water and refusing to leave. Seeing this, David could only shake his head helplessly. These girls are simply desperate, but David can't go out at this time, otherwise he will be discovered by Xiao Chao. Fortunately, just when some of the girls couldn't hold on and were about to die from exhaustion, the great master who spoke at the mountain gate appeared. Okay, the time has come, everyone, please leave, our eldest young master has carefully prepared gifts for you. The Grand Master said to the girls. As soon as the girls heard the gifts, they all came out of the spring pool, put on their clothes and left with the Great Master. These girls don't know yet, in just that moment, many people will lose 10 years or more lifespan. After the girls left, Xiao Chao suddenly opened his mouth, and the vortex in mid-air was directly sucked into his mouth. Ha ha ha, so much yin qi is enough for my strength to improve a lot. When I am inhaling Xiaolan's yin qi, I will definitely be able to break through to Wuzong and surpass my father. Xiao Chao slowly got up and laughed excitedly. He didn't know that behind a stone not far away, David was watching all this, but at this time David had no interest in this Xiao Chao, he was interested in the Ling Chuan. After Xiao Chao left, David couldn't wait to walk to the spring. Looking at the bottomless spring, David reached out and touched it in the water. The moment David's hand touched the spring water, aura like a volcanic eruption spewed directly towards David, and David was thirsty to absorb these auras. There must be something in here. The moment David touched the spring water, he knew that the spring water did not have aura, and the source of these auras was in the spring. A treasure for sure. Without the slightest hesitation, David took off his clothes and stabbed his head down. The further down, the stronger the spiritual energy, and with David's continuous diving, the bottom of the water began to become a little dark. Not knowing how deep he dived, David felt that the pressure on his body was getting bigger and bigger. If it weren't for his strong body, David at this moment might have been crushed into flesh. Chapter 733. David held his breath, quietly absorbed the surrounding spiritual energy, and did not continue to dive. With this rich spiritual energy, David was sure that he would be able to improve to a new level within a few days. It's just that David doesn't have much time to stay here to practice. July 15th is just around the corner, and Xiaolan is still on it, so Xiao Chao will definitely attack Xiaolan. After a short rest, David continued to dive down. As the depth of the dive got deeper and deeper, it should have gotten darker and darker, but it started to get brighter below. Immediately afterwards, a black shadow came towards David. David frowned, knowing that this is the depths of the spring. What will there be? When the shadow approached, David discovered that it turned out to be a tortoise. The tortoise's shell was 1 meter square. It was the first time David had seen such a big tortoise. The turtle's eyes looked at David tightly, his eyes were full of hostility, and on the turtle's shell, there were some symbols that David couldn't understand. Could it be that such a huge spiritual energy is emitted by this turtle? David also looked closely at the turtle that suddenly appeared, motionless. After looking at David twice, the tortoise suddenly turned his head and dived down without attacking David, which made David relieved. But David followed closely. He wanted to see how this turtle appeared in Quan's eyes. But David just swam a few meters when he saw that the tortoise had come back, but at this moment the symbol on the tortoise's tortoise shell began to flash with golden light. Soon, golden light filled the entire waters, like a big net, wrapping David in the middle. Formation. David stared at the golden light flashing around him, his eyes widened instantly. This is not the magic technique of those warlocks, but the real method of the fairy family, the real formation technique. How could someone lay a formation on a turtle's tortoise shell? David was very surprised, but he was also a little surprised. In this spring, someone put a formation on the tortoise shell, so there must be extremely precious treasures here. David wanted to continue downstream, but his body was wrapped in golden light, so he couldn't rush out at all, let alone downstream. Even if David wanted to float to the surface, it was impossible. This time, David was a little panicked. Can't he be trapped here forever? Squinting his eyes slightly, David clenched his fists and waved fiercely towards the swimming turtle. David knew that as long as the turtle was killed, the formation would naturally be broken. The power of David's punch raised a water column in the water, and then slammed into the tortoise. Boom! After a loud bang, David only felt a huge counter-thrust strike, but the swimming turtle was unharmed. Shhhhhhh. Just after David attacked the tortoise, the formation on the tortoise shell flashed golden light again, and several streaks of energy attacked David. Direction of air movement. It's just that David was imprisoned here at the moment, and there was no way to escape, so he could only use his powerful body to resist these attacks of strength. A burst of pain came from his arm. David saw that his arm had been cut, and blood was slowly flowing out, staining the surrounding spring water red. However, these springs stained with David's blood seem to be imprisoned in this formation, and they cannot be dispersed at all. David hurriedly covered his wound with his hand, and soon the wound healed slowly, no blood was flowing out, and the formation on the tortoise shell was not attacking David. Just use the formation method to control David, so that he can't swim around in the spring. Chapter 734. Tianmumen Hall, now the time for worship has come. Xiao Lan secretly lifted her hijab and began to find out where David was. Where did this guy go? He didn't sell me, he ran away by himself. Xiaolan anxiously looked for David, but unfortunately she didn't see David's shadow at all. The auspicious time has come, the newcomers are invited to worship heaven and earth. A Grand Master of Tianmumen shouted loudly. Xia Chao looked at Xiaolan with excited eyes, and his face was full of smiles. After worshipping heaven and earth, they could enter the bridal chamber. At that time, he would put Xiaolan inside her body without Xiaolan's knowledge. All the yin qi was sucked away, and by that time, Xia Chao would be able to jump directly into several realms and step directly into the realm of Wuzong. Just ask the whole world, how many people do you think Wuzong is so young? Xia Chao couldn't hide his excitement when he thought that he might be the youngest Wuzong in the martial arts world. Master Xia, why is Clan Master Xia not here on this happy day? Looking at the high hall, the chair was empty. Dali Tiu asked in a puzzled way. How can my son get married, and I am not present? My father has some important things to do. He has been away for more than half a month, and it will take some time before he can come back. Marriage is a matter for Xiaolan and I. It doesn't matter if my parents are here, and King Miao didn't come, right? Xia Chao explained to the Dali head with a faint smile. Dalatu didn't say anything, but Xiaolan, who had been wearing a red hijab, spoke up. It's too unlucky for my parents not to participate in such a big day. I think it's better to wait until the Xia clan master returns. As Xiaolan said, she took off the red hijab herself. How could she really follow Xia Chao to worship heaven and earth? Wouldn't she really become his wife? Xiaolan disagreed. Now David doesn't know where to go, and Xiaolan can only use this as an excuse. Xia Chao's face turned cold. I said, my father has gone to work, and it will take some time to come back, and today's date has already been booked, and many people know that if the wedding is not held, Don't I want to be the laughing stock? I don't care, anyway, I won't go to church without my parents. After Xiaolan finished speaking, she turned to leave. At this time, Xiaolan scolded David for a long time in her heart. David said that she just let Xiaolan act as a pretense, and she would not really let her follow Xia Chao to worship, but now that the time is up, David didn't even see the shadow of David arrive. But when Xiaolan walked to the entrance of the main hall, she was directly stopped by the people from Tianwu Men. You just left, aren't you kidding me? Without my opening, let me see if you can get out of Tianwu Men. Xia Chao said with a gloomy expression. Xiaolan looked at the people in Tianwu Men, eyeing them with murderous aura, so she could only turn her head to look at Xia Chao and said, on such an important occasion, your father is not here, isn't that looking down on me? Of course I can't follow you. Worship. I tell you, in this hall today, you have to worship, and you have to worship if you don't. Now this is Tianwu Men, not your Miao village. Even in your Miao village, I'm not afraid of you. Xia Chao directly tore his face and threatened Xiaolan. After all, the strength of Tianwu Men is stronger than that of Miao village, not to mention that this is still the territory of Tianwu Men. As soon as Xia Chao's voice fell, the disciples of Tianwu Men showed their weapons one after another, which surprised Xiaolan and the members of Miao village who followed. If Xia Chao wants to do something to them, this is on Tianwu Men's territory, and they have no chance of winning. Seeing the panicked look of everyone in Miao village, the corner of Xia Chao's mouth twitched. Xiaolan, I just adore you, and King Miao has promised me, isn't it good for our two strong alliances? Why do you want to go back on your words? You have to think about these people in your Miao village. Chapter 735. Xia Chao didn't want to rush Xiaolan either. He needed to live. If Xiaolan was hurried and desperate, Xiaolan would make a mistake and his plan would fall short. Xiaolan looked at the people in Miao village, and at this moment, these people were looking at herself with expectant eyes. Now the lives of these people are all in Xiaolan's hands. At this moment, Xiaolan's face became extremely ugly. If it was just herself, she would rather die than follow Xia Chao to worship, but this was related to the lives of dozens of people in Miao village, and Xiaolan was in a dilemma. Miss Xiaolan, don't worry about us, if you don't want to marry this Xia Chao, just run away. Just when Xiaolan was embarrassed, a member of the Miao village suddenly jumped out with a look of death. This person is also in love with Xiaolan. Seeing Xiaolan being threatened, he was angry for a while, so he stood up. A small Miao village member dares to jump out and point fingers. Xia Chao's face froze, and then he was shot with a palm. Xiaolan and Wulatu didn't have time to react, only to see the Miao village member spraying blood instantly, flying several meters away, and was shot to death. Xia Chao, you are going too far. Xiaolan's eyes widened, and she drew a dagger directly from her waist. The members of the Miao village were also very angry and showed their weapons one after another. Ha ha ha, I didn't expect the big day, you still have a dagger on your body, are you trying to murder me? Seeing Xiaolan take out the dagger from her waist, Xia Chao laughed out loud. Xiaolan didn't know how to answer. She hid the dagger and really planned to use Xia Chao's strength against her, so she followed Xia Chao desperately. Anyway, she couldn't let Xia Chao succeed. Okay, my patience is limited, I can either marry me, or die. Xia Chao's body erupted with murderous aura. Xiaolan gritted her teeth, and her face became more and more ugly. She was not afraid of death, but what about the other people from Miao village? This has been with her for 20 years, and many of them took care of her when they were young. Xia Chao, since your father is not here, I will send someone to find my foster father and let him sit in the high hall, otherwise the wedding will not be complete. Xiaolan said to Xia Chao. Xiaolan is a plan to delay the army. King Miao has already died. Where can I find it? She is just delaying the time to see where this David has gone, and why didn't he show up? No, she will not wait for anyone, and then send someone to invite King Miao. What time will it be after you come back? Xiao Chao didn't have the patience to wait. Now he only needs to absorb the yin qi from Xiaolan's body, and he can break through Wuzong himself. He doesn't want to wait for a minute. If you don't agree, even if I fight to death, I won't give you worship. As Xiaolan said, she even put the dagger on her neck, looking like she was going to commit suicide. This time, Xiao Chao was stunned. If Xiaolan really committed suicide, that corpse would be useless to him. Okay, I promise you, but I only give you 1 hour. If your people can't invite King Miao, don't blame me for being rude. Xiao Chao finally compromised. Seeing Xiao Chao nodding in agreement, Xiaolan let out a long sigh of relief. Xiaolan nodded and agreed to Xiao Chao, then looked at Dalatu, Dalatu, go and invite my foster father to officiate the wedding for me, you must be quick. When talking to Dalatu, Xiaolan kept winking. She didn't ask Dalatu to find King Miao. King Miao was already dead, and it was impossible to find him. She asked Dalatu to find David. Let's see where this guy David has gone, now only David can save them. Dolly nodded, turned around and left, while Xiaolan and the others in Miao village were surrounded by the people of Tianwumen in the hall, waiting quietly. Chapter 736. At this time, David was still trapped in the spring. In order to break free from the formation, David tried his best. Unfortunately, no matter how hard he tried, he could not break free from the shackles of the formation. And the big tortoise was swimming right in front of him, and David didn't dare to shoot at the big tortoise. David is already very anxious. He doesn't know how long it has been, and he doesn't know what happened to Xiaolan above. If Xiaolan is really succeeded by that Xiao Chao, David is afraid that he will not forgive himself. He encouraged Xiaolan to come to worship with Xiao Chao. Ah! David suddenly shouted anxiously, you dead turtle, I will fight for you. David roared, a faint golden light erupted from his fist, and then he swung punch after punch towards the slow-swimming turtle. Bang bang bang! A punch beats a punch. Fortunately, this spring is full of spiritual energy, and the spiritual energy consumed by David can be compensated for by the rapid turn of the heart condensation art. As David punched the tortoise, the magic circle on the tortoise shell also began to flicker frequently. Soon, David was already scarred and blood was constantly flowing out, but David gritted his teeth, the anger in his heart was burning, he did not flinch at all, and was still punching. At this moment, David is like a mad beast, his eyes are scarlet, and he has already disregarded his own safety. He doesn't want to be trapped here forever. Click! Suddenly, a slight sound made the mad David instantly calm down. David looked closely and found that the big swimming turtle had cracks on the tortoise shell at this time. David was overjoyed. He thought he couldn't hurt the big tortoise. Now it seems that the big tortoise is not invincible. Seeing that the tortoise shell of the big tortoise had been cracked, the strength in David's hand increased again. David's body had already been drenched in blood by the energy in the formation, but David didn't care. David punched the big tortoise with punch after punch. The big tortoise, who had no feeling at first, would shake after being punched by David, and even make some strange sounds in his mouth, like howling. After David punched dozens of punches, finally the big turtle's tortoise shell cracked into pieces and fell off, and after the big tortoise screamed, its body quickly sank. As the tortoise shell shattered, the golden lights all over David disappeared, and the shackles of the magic circle also disappeared. I want to run. David saw that the big turtle wanted to sink underwater and escape, so he chased after it closely. There was panic in the eyes of the big tortoise. Without the protection of the tortoise shell and the magic array on the tortoise shell, the big tortoise was like fish on a chopping board and could not escape at all. Just now you trapped me with a magic circle, do you want to run now? See if I won't stew you into a BA5 TARD soup. David tried his best to catch up with the big tortoise, grabbing the tortoise's head with one hand, and preparing to punch the big tortoise to death with the other hand. Without the hard tortoise shell, the big tortoise couldn't bear David's punch at all. But just when David was about to kill the big tortoise let out a whimper, followed by a mouth, a crystal clear, only thumb-sized bead spat out of the big tortoise's mouth. Seeing this, David grabbed the bead and looked at it carefully. He didn't know what it was, but he could feel the aura emanating from the bead. Chapter 737. Seeing that David grabbed the bead, the big tortoise immediately kicked on its four legs, as if begging David to let him go. David looked at the beads in his hand and let go of the big turtle. For the sake of your gift, I will spare your life. Seeing David let go of himself, the big turtle nodded and thanked David again and again, but just as David continued to go downstream, the big turtle seemed a little flustered to stop David. David didn't understand, why did this big turtle stop him? Just when David was puzzled, a sudden roar came from the depths of the spring, followed by a huge shock wave, which directly shocked David's ears, and the whole person almost fainted. After hearing this roar, the big tortoise swam away in a panic, and swam towards the surface of the water rapidly. David shook his head to wake himself up a little. Looking at the bottomless spring, David hesitated. The roar that just came from below was so powerful that David didn't know what danger would lie below, but his huge curiosity made David not want to give up just like that, so he bit the bullet and dived down again. As David dived deeper and deeper, the space below became larger and larger, and the water shone with light was clear. What is that? Suddenly, David saw that under the spring's eyes, a sword emitting a light blue light was being inserted into a huge stone, and the strong spiritual energy in the water was emitted by this sword. The sword, this must be the sword. David was overjoyed. He happened to be missing a weapon now, and when he saw this sword, David liked it very much. David quickly swam towards the sword. When he was only a dozen meters away from the sword, he noticed this time that the word Zanlongjian was engraved on the sword. Dragon-slaying sword. David was stunned. Could it be that this sword can kill dragons? David was a little unconvinced. In today's society, dragons have long become legends, and it is said that giant dragons are powerful and can spit fire and water. Can a sword kill a dragon? But no matter whether it can kill the dragon or not, this sword is definitely not an ordinary thing, and David likes it at a glance. But when David stretched out his hand to pull out the dragon-slaying sword, suddenly a huge force sent David flying out. Immediately afterwards, the bottom of the water tumbled for a while, and soon a person condensed from the spring water slowly appeared. This man was still holding a knife in his hand, looming under the water, and David could only vaguely see that it was a human figure. The one who cuts the dragon's sword, kills without mercy. Accompanied by a hoarse old man's voice, the looming human figure suddenly slashed out with a knife. A watermark crossed the bottom of the water and came directly towards David. David was startled and hurriedly dodged to the side. Rumbling. There was a deafening sound, and then it was like an explosion of a cannonball, and a big crater appeared directly on the bottom of the water. You must know that this is at the bottom of the water, there is water resistance, and this knife has such great power, which shows how powerful the humanoid monsters condensed by this spring water are. Humph, it's just a wisp of consciousness, and you dare to stop me. David's body emitted a faint golden light, followed by an angry shout, and punched the humanoid monster. Boom! With a loud bang, the humanoid monster was directly smashed by David's punch, turned into countless water bottoms, and mixed with the spring water. So vulnerable, David snorted coldly. But soon behind David, the humanoid monster condensed again, and slashed David's shoulder with a knife. David's body was hit hard, and he fell to the bottom of the spring in an instant, and the sediment underneath also rolled around, making the clear spring water very turbid. Chapter 738. Tianmumen Hall. An hour passed quickly, but Daylitu still did not appear, which proved that he had not found David's shadow. David, This BA5TARD, I must kill him when I see him. Xiaolan's face is full of indignation. It's been an hour, has King Miao come yet? At this time, Xiaochao led someone into the hall. Maybe on the way, we'll be waiting. Xiaolan said hurriedly. Do you think of me as a 3-year-old child? How far is it from Miao village to Tianyumen? With the strength of their great masters, it only takes half an hour to go back and forth. Prove that King Miao will not come, we should also hold the ceremony. Xiaochao raised the corner of his mouth. Xiaolan didn't speak, she bit her lip tightly, anxious in her heart. Okay, don't let me be rough with you, quickly put the hijab on, we should hold the ceremony. Seeing that Xiaolan didn't speak, Xiaochao said impatiently. Master Xia, we are. I said, I won't be waiting, can't you hear? Xiaochao glared at Xiaolan and roared angrily. Xiaolan knew that she couldn't procrastinate, so she turned her heart. Xiaochao, I will not marry you. If you want me, you can only get my body. After Xiaolan finished speaking, she suddenly cut the dagger towards her neck. When Xiaochao saw this, he stepped forward and hit Xiaolan on the shoulder, causing the dagger in Xiaolan's hand to fall to the ground instantly. When the members of the Miao village saw this, they showed their weapons and prepared to rush out, but they were quickly subdued by the people of Tianyumen. Xiaochao controlled Xiaolan and said with a playful look, You want to die, it's not that easy. When I run out of you, whether you live or die has nothing to do with me. After finishing speaking, Xiaochao directly carried Xiaolan and walked towards the bedroom at the back. Let go of me, let go of me. Xiaolan shouted, but being controlled by Xiaochao, Xiaolan couldn't move at all. After entering the room, Xiaochao threw Xiaolan directly on the bed, staring at Xiaolan like a beast, just like staring at his prey. Seeing Xiaochao's eyes made Xiaolan tremble with fright. Be obedient, you can still live, otherwise I will make your life worse than death. Xiaochao threatened Xiaolan. You don't want to be like this, it scares me to death. I will be afraid. Since you like me, you should treat me well. Don't you just want to sleep with me? I can satisfy you. Suddenly, Xiaolan, who was on the bed, spoke softly, her eyes were full of tenderness, she twisted her body, and showed a variety of amorous feelings. If a man saw Xiaolan like this, he would definitely be unable to control himself. This is Xiaolan's charm. She is not Xiaochao's opponent in terms of force. Xiaolan can only perform her own charm on Xiaochao. In the face of his own charm, there is no man who will not compromise, except for the pervert David. Seeing Xiaolan like that, Xiaochao, who was originally vicious, suddenly became a little sluggish, and looked at Xiaolan with a wicked smile. Little beauty, I love you to death, you hurry up and have fun with me now. After speaking, Xiaochao rushed towards Xiaolan. Xiaolan got up in a hurry, but Xiaochao grabbed her hand and couldn't escape. Xiaochao looked at Xiaolan slyly, and touched Xiaolan's waist with one hand, trying to hold Xiaolan in her arms. Don't worry, let's drink some wine first, flirt. Xiaolan pushed Xiaochao away. Okay, Xiaochao nodded again and again. Xiaolan walked towards the wine cabinet in the room and opened it directly with a bottle of red wine. She needs to delay now, hoping that Dalato can find David. Seeing Xiaolan take down the red wine, the corner of Xiaochao's mouth twitched. Chapter 739. Soon, Xiaolan opened the red wine, poured 2 glasses, and brought it to Xiaochao. Be obedient, I will satisfy you. Xiaolan threw an eyebrow at Na Xiaochao, and directly fascinated Na Xiaochao. Obey, I'll be obedient. Xiaochao nodded desperately. Have a good drink with me, don't do anything with me, you know. Seeing Xiaochao like that, Xiaolan raised her face proudly. No, no. Xiaochao still nodded. Xiaolan handed the red wine to Xiaochao, who drank it all. Seeing this, Xiao Lan also drank the red wine in her hand, and then Xiao Lan filled the wine glass again. She planned to get this Xia Chao drunk so that she could escape. But when Xiaolan was about to let Xia Chao drink again, suddenly Xiaolan felt dizzy, weak in her limbs, and the wine glass in her hand fell to the ground. This wine, is there something wrong with this wine? Xiaolan was shocked. She knew that she was like this because there was something wrong with the wine. Ha ha ha, I've been in the wine for a long time, but I didn't expect you to ask for it yourself. Xia Chao stopped pretending at this time, and laughed directly. Did you miss my charm? Xiaolan was surprised. How could Xia Chao not respond to his charms? To tell you the truth, your charms are only useful to men, but now I am not a real man. When Xia Chao said this again, he was not ashamed at all, but rather complacent. Then why do you want to marry me? Xiaolan looked at Xia Chao in shock, not understanding why Xia Chao wanted to marry her since he was no longer a man. Of course it's for the yin qi in your body. You are born to be charming. I miss the yin qi in a girl like you, but it's my best cultivation resource. Xia Chao raised the corner of his mouth. After I absorb the yin qi in your body, I will be able to break through the realm of Wuzong and become the youngest Wuzong in the entire martial arts world. Xiaolan listened to Xia Chao's words with fear in her eyes. She wanted to escape, but her body couldn't move at all. She wanted to kill herself by biting her tongue, but unfortunately she didn't even have the strength to commit suicide at this time. Don't think about struggling, just accept your fate. After Xia Chao finished speaking, he suddenly pinched his fingers, and then a vortex appeared in the air, swirling above Xiaolan's head. In the spring. David has been fighting with the humanoid monster condensed by the spring for a long time now. It's just that every time David smashes the humanoid monster will condense again immediately. No matter what David does, there is no way to really destroy the humanoid monster. The spiritual power in David's Danshan was rapidly decreasing, and the concentrated heart technique was running rapidly, but it still could not supply David's massive consumption. David knew that if he continued like this, he would not be beaten to death, but would be slowly exhausted to death, and David couldn't be exhausted like this all the time, because he didn't know what happened to Xiaolan above. Boy, I'm just a wisp of divine consciousness, invisible and indestructible, you can't beat me, don't be spying on my sword. The humanoid monster said. David's forehead was full of sweat, and his face was very solemn. The humanoid monster in front of him was immortal and could always come back to life. What method should he use? Just when David was thinking, the humanoid monster slashed over, and David dodged, followed by another punch that directly shattered the humanoid monster. But soon, the spring water condensed again and became the same as before, and every time David punched, the spiritual power in his Danshan decreased a bit. Chapter 740. I said, you can't beat me, don't waste your time. The humanoid monster said slowly, this spring is my life. As long as there is spring water, I can live forever. Do you still have the ability to drain the spring water? The words of the humanoid monster made David's eyes light up instantly, and he seemed to have thought of something. David grinned, I really want to thank you for your reminder. Although I can't drain the spring water, I have a way to keep the spring water away from me. After David finished speaking, a huge spiritual power radiated from the body. Without the slightest stinginess, David forced all the spiritual power out of the body. Soon, David's body formed a protective cover that was several meters square, and the surrounding spring water was squeezed to other places. There was no drop of spring water around David, and it was blocked by the protective cover. Without the spring water, the humanoid monster looked at David with a little panic. Baby, what are you trying to do? This dragon-slaying sword belongs to this old man. Because my soul is damaged, I hide the dragon-slaying sword here. How can you steal it? Since I have seen it, it proves that I have a relationship with this sword. Such a good sword is hidden here. Isn't this a waste? David smiled coldly. In this protective cover, there is no spring water, and the humanoid monster has no ability to resurrect. You dare to take my sword, I will kill you. The humanoid monster was furious and slashed at David with a knife. As a result, David smashed it with another punch, and all the scattered water droplets were instantly absorbed by the protective cover, and the humanoid monster never appeared again. David was overjoyed when he saw this, and walked towards the dragon-slaying sword. When David approached the dragon-slaying sword, the dragon-slaying sword made a slight humming sound, and the blade trembled slightly, as if responding to David. But David stretched out his hand to draw the dragon sword, and a huge anti-shock force directly sent David flying. How is this going? David frowned. Now that the humanoid monster has been eliminated, why can't he pull out the sword? Looking at the dragon-slaying sword in front of him, David seemed to remember something, bit his finger, and dripped a drop of blood on the dragon-slaying sword. Buzzing! Suddenly, the dragon-slaying sword shook violently, and David got that drop of blood, which was instantly absorbed by the dragon-slaying sword, and then the dragon-slaying sword turned into a red color. Boom! There was a violent explosion, and the huge shock wave directly knocked David out, and the protective cover around David was instantly shattered. When David got up with difficulty, he found that the dragon-slaying sword was flying towards him quickly. As soon as David stretched out his hand, he directly grabbed the dragon-slaying sword, and David could feel the connection with the dragon-slaying sword in an instant. Soon, David saw that the blood of his body began to flow through the dragon-slaying sword, as if the dragon-slaying sword had become a part of his body. Slowly, the dragon-slaying sword became weaker and weaker, and finally disappeared. But at this time, David could still feel that the dragon-slaying sword was in his hands. And the spiritual power that was consumed by himself also filled the entire Danshan in an instant. Is this the unity of man and sword? David thought about it, and the dragon-slaying sword instantly appeared in David's hand. David was ecstatic in his heart. This is simply a sword. With this sword, David can easily kill Wuzong, who just broke through. Whoa, whoa! Soon, the spring water in the spring began to quickly pour back into the place where the sword was inserted just now, that is, in an instant, the spring became dry, and there was no more drop of spring water to be seen. David looked at the top of his head, and a few jumped out of the spring. At this time, the spring pool below the spring was extremely dry, and there was no trace of water stains. And the rich spiritual energy of Tian Wu Men has disappeared at this moment. Even if David tried his best to sense it, he can only sense the thin aura between heaven and earth. It seems that the spiritual energy before Tian Wu Men was all because of this dragon-slaying sword. Existing.